evening, folks, and welcome to tonight's special City Council meeting. I proudly call this council meeting to order. I kindly ask our city clerk to please take the roll call.
Bowering?
Here.
Bruno? Ruby?
Ruby here.
Kilberg?
Here.
Kasserag?
Here.
Baladra?
Here.
Marks?
Here.
Mayor? Paschke?
Here.
Swanson?
Here.
We begin our council meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. I would like to invite the distinguished Mr. and Mrs. Hune to please lead us in the pledge. Look at the look on your face, Mrs.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we jump into the only one item of business, I would like to take a moment and invite the community and the council in joining me for a moment of silence regarding the loss of a special businessman here in town. Many of you, I know the council's aware, many of you probably know that Mr. Curtis Gulbro passed away last week. Curtis, as we all know, was the co-owner of Foxfire Restaurant with his son, Casey. His wife of 60 years, Jacqueline, their four sons, Jeff, Casey, James, Kurt, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, celebrated his life this past Thursday and Friday, and we want to extend to his family our appreciation for his helping make Geneva a more delicious place with the Foxfire Restaurant, and send to them our warmest thoughts. So if I could just ask for a moment of silence to honor Mr. Gulbro. Thank you all very much. Again, one item tonight, folks. It's item 2A, consider ordinance number 2024-31, granting a special use for an 85-foot wireless communication facility to be located at 1749 South Randall Road. The applicant is DRA Properties, LLC. I'll entertain a motion in a second, then I have a brief statement to make. Motion by Marks, seconded by Kasserag. The brief statement I have is important. I will also enter this into the record without objection. For background purposes, ladies and gentlemen, this matter has received a full public hearing on May 23rd, 2024, before the city's Planning and Zoning Commission, and pursuant to the city's regulatory review and approval process, is now before this council for final deliberation and decision. The public hearing before our PZC was the opportunity for a full vetting of the petitioner's plans and requests, as our Planning and Zoning Commission is duty-bound to take evidence, undertake questioning, and conduct a full evidentiary hearing of the items with full public participation. Consequently, the official public hearing process is concluded, and the record adduced has been presented for and is so presented to tonight's City Council. I have every confidence that the City Council has reviewed the record referenced in its entirety, and it is now fully prepared to consider Ordinance 2024-31. I respectfully request everyone present this evening that while you will be invited to provide public comment at the public comment portion of the agenda on this item or any item you wish to share with us or ask questions of us, you are not allowed to participate in public dialogue, questioning of the council, the petitioner, or the professional staff. Consistent with our state and local ordinances establishing the due process and practices this City Council is proud to uphold, again, there is not an opportunity for the public to provide comments during the council's deliberations. Accordingly, on behalf of the City Council, please refrain from voicing any comments toward the petitioner, Geneva's professional staff, and/or the City Council. Doing so will have no material effect on our decision, but will only delay the process this evening. To my colleagues on the City Council, please be sure to turn your microphones on when recognized to speak, and as always, please turn your microphones off when you've completed your remarks. I also ask, as a personal favor, when you have concluded your remarks, please announce that you have either yielded the floor or state, "I have nothing further at this time." It assists me to help facilitate the discussion and deliberations with the care and respect they deserve. There has been a motion and there has been a second to put this matter on the floor. This matter is on the floor. I turn the floor over to any council member who wishes to speak. We have a motion to approve ordinance, oh, there we go. Alderperson Bowring?
Okay, don't mind taking us off. I guess I would like to come back to an issue that's pretty central to my consideration. I believe this is a question for the applicant. Has to do with public safety. So in your materials, you state that this is crucial for maintaining now and into the future as you expect call volumes to increase, the ability to cover 911 calls. I guess I'm curious, so I'm curious how to independently verify that as a member of this council who is not cellular communications expert. Are there other sites that would meet that, or is this really the singular, so I know that there's a number of sites that were listed in the material you provided. They're fairly close to this site. I guess just, can you elaborate on that issue a bit for us? Thank you.
Council member, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council, my name is Doug Dolan with DRA Properties and the applicant. And yes, one of the primary reasons for this cell site is to enhance the 911 coverage to the city of Geneva. And that is done primarily through coverage and capacity. So there's two items going on simultaneously, which is that we want to enhance the coverage to the residents and businesses in Geneva, and we want to enhance the capacity, the ability to handle additional data and additional calls. And part of those calls are 911 calls. And so part of our enhancement to the city of Geneva's communication system is to provide enhanced 911 coverage. We do have data, and we presented earlier about dropped calls. That's one of the areas that we're having an issue with. So we would like to have this site in order to enhance the coverage and capacity that both police, doctors, firemen, first responders all use the cellular network. And so this is both to provide coverage and capacity to the 911 service.
Okay, and are you able, again, to speak to like the process by which this site was determined to be the best site? I understand the others listed on that.
Correct.
I understand the reasons why those were not as good of options. I'm curious if there are any other options like up and down the Randall Road corridor that were considered or were not considered, and if they were not considered, like why not? I know that's a bit broad, but there are some larger commercial areas along there, and where it seems like possibly, but again, I don't know for sure, the distance to residences might be less, or there might be fewer residences impacted.
Right. So as part of our zoning application, we did a listing of all the properties that were considered along Randall Road. And we listed the distance to the residences for all the properties that were not in the front yard of commercial properties, but in the rear yard. This was one among the very few that had the greatest amount of distance to the most amount of single family homes. We back up to a park. Two-thirds of our circle around our site is commercial. Mm-hmm. We're zoned in a commercial district. We do have residential behind us, but the fewest number of homes were within the view shed of our stealth tower.
Okay. So that's the sum total of the sites that you're willing, that were really taken into consideration for this?
Yeah, we probably looked at 20 plus sites in our search area.
Okay.
And this particular site had a large parking lot behind the retail center. That was part of the attraction. It's also equidistant from the existing Verizon cell sites. So there's a hole, coverage gap, as was provided in our zoning application. The RF engineer depicted the hole in our coverage, and he also depicted this cell site, if it were in service, how we would fill that coverage and capacity gap.
Okay, and would something on the other side of Randall Road potentially fill that site also? I think that the sites tended to be on the
Right.
east side of Randall Road, not the
Right.
west.
The west side is a similar situation where there's a narrow strip of commercial properties and it backs up to residential property. So perhaps out of the pan and into the fire is not a good
Okay.
reason, but it would be a similar situation.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all of the questions I have for you. I guess I do have some comments based on my review of the record in front of PZC, which I can briefly share. Sorry, you're welcome to sit down
Thank
if
you.
you want. I am aware of and very sensitive to the fact that there has been a lot of public disapproval of this proposal. I feel like I have to weigh that against the purported benefit to the public good, which here the claim is that it will, if not now, but in the future, as we expect call volumes to increase, maintain a level of cellular network connectivity that I think we all would expect and want to rely on. I did spend some time going into some of the material presented by residents that seemed, in my view, to be very persuasive to members of the PZC, particularly their finding that criteria 2 is not met, that this might actually impact property values in a negative way. And I did not find that the evidence presented there met the burden for me to convince me that the PZC found correctly on that point. I do understand people have strong opinions about a new addition to the neighborhood, something like a pole, but I think we all can agree that we all use cell phones and that's only going to increase. So I guess my question is, you know, how do we meet that need, even if it's not apparent to the people in the neighborhood that there is a problem at this point? How do we meet that need for now and in the future? And I guess this seems like a reasonable option to me. One of the things that came up in some of the peer-reviewed studies that I was looking at is that many of the poles that they were looking at in their studies are much, much taller. They're on the order of 60 meters tall, which is about 196 feet for those of us stuck with not the metric system. And that some of the remedies that had been proposed by past academic folks looking at this were you know, more concealment and camouflaging of towers. And I think that this is a good effort to do that. It's 85 feet tall, which is smaller than I think that the existing cell phone towers are in this neighborhood. So I think I'm not in agreement with PZC in their findings that criteria 2 and 5 were not met. Thank you, I'm done.
Thank you. Alderperson Marks.
I live in that area. I use Verizon. I've never had a drop call. I always have full bars, even when I'm driving. I think what was given by the residents gave me enough doubt that 2 and 5 are clearly met. I probably agree with Commissioner Tim Moran, who summed it up perfectly for me. There was enough doubt there that 2 was met, 5 was met. He even questioned if number 1 was met. So I am going to oppose this. I don't believe those burdens were met, or at least there was enough question and doubt in my mind, I should say, that allow me to question whether some of that was all. It gives enough doubt in my mind that I'm going to say that I don't believe those 2 or 3 were met. So I am going to oppose this going. I didn't see anything new from the last time this was brought to the city. I know it didn't make it to the council.
We were supposed to receive information that we haven't received. That's one of the stipulations from the PVC, the Planning and Zoning Commission. We didn't get that information, which questions, we weren't given enough of that detail. So it brings up more questions in my mind. So I really do feel that the bar was at least questioned enough that 2 and 5 for sure were not met. So that's just my opinion. And I know we call balls and strikes here, as the city attorney has told us, and sometimes we're on the fringe. So that's my feeling on the matter. And I do believe, and someone can correct me, but I do believe 911 calls always take priority for anything. So from a public safety point, 911s take priority always, at least my understanding of it, and I could be wrong. So I don't see it as an issue for safety at this point. I think there are plenty of areas around there that still can be looked at. Small towers can still be looked at. And I think we just need to push that bar to have the company think a little bit further, rather than looking for the quickest and easiest solution. Mayor, now I yield the floor.
Anyone else from the dais? Alderperson Maladra, then Alderperson Kilberg.
To my mind, there's two important issues, and each of my partners have hit on both of them. Regarding public safety, I think from your comments, I can't tell if the increased capacity and coverage provides an ancillary benefit of enhanced 911 service, or if it's just something that comes along with the business model to grow your business. I agree with Alderman Marks. I don't see any evidence that says you're losing 911 calls right now. The fact that if you grow your service enough, you might have an issue in the future is as much to do with your business model as it is with a lack of a pole in a residential neighborhood. So the public safety benefit, I think it's on you guys, or it's on the company to figure out how to do that with the least impact possible. Regarding the impact on property values, your reason for not looking at other sites is more residents are affected. Now, if there is no impact to the residents, I don't know why that would matter. What would matter most is the exact spot you could put the tower to get the benefit that you're looking for. The fact that you excluded some sites because more homes would be in the circle means that there's probably some sort of acknowledged detriment to those homes, and we're trying to minimize that impact. When I looked at some of your discussion referenced towers a mile to the south and a mile to the north. If I understand it correctly, the tower to the north would be pretty much where Meyer is, 38 and Randall, and there's no residential there. And the tower to the south looks to me to be in an area that will be residential someday, but is not currently residential. And I think that that's an important difference. When people know what they're getting into, everything's fair game. But when you come to a neighborhood that for 30 years has not had to look at a utility use adjacent to their property, I think things are different. And I would view it differently if I saw some demonstrated public good, but the statement that we'll get better 911 coverage along with all the other better coverage and stuff like that, I don't see the detriment to safety that perhaps other people might take from those comments. So to me, when I look at this and I think about what does Geneva get from it? I'm not really seeing a benefit to Geneva. Special use standard 1 talks about whether or not the use is consistent with our plans. In this case, it's totally out of sync with our plans. Our plans in this area call for commercial property and residential property. It does not call for utility uses. So I also believe that special use standard 1 is not met. And there is enough question about the impact of cell towers to property values to make me be able to say that we may not be able to demonstrate there is no impact, but we can't demonstrate the opposite either, and so we need to be prudent and careful. And that prudence makes me think this is not the right thing to do. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Alderperson Kilberg.
Just a couple of comments. I want to recognize our Planning and Zoning Commission and their unanimous decision as it relates to this topic. I appreciate all.
Let me start over. I want to recognize the Planning and Zoning Commission for their dedication and hard work as it relates to this issue, and the fact that they had a lot of excellent questions, those that watched the tape from May 23rd. I also think that there is an important consideration here as well, that they took into consideration the residents' input as it related to this topic, and they weighed that versus the legal ramifications as it relates to the decision. And I think that's important, and as a result, I'm going to oppose this request. And I also, as it relates to 911 calls, I've had communication with representatives of TRICOM that respond to those 911 calls, as well as Tri-City Ambulance, and they have not indicated that there's been a major issue as it might relate to drop calls. So with that, that was another factor that weighed into my consideration of this matter.
Anyone else on the dais? Alderperson Patchke.
So I'll admit that I'm a bit on the fence. I guess I have a couple questions. Maybe to start, in regards to the 911 service, I guess I'm reluctant to lean into the argument that we don't have issues with that currently, because would we really want to wait until we know there are issues with that to address that as an issue? I feel like that would be the epitome of irresponsible decision-making, to wait until we have issues with 911 calls to make a decision on something. My question for you would be, I've watched the PZC meeting, and I know you talked about the tower to the north, the tower to the south. There was also discussion of technology improving. Some towers are doing better jobs than others. Is there any way to enhance or improve those towers so that they can provide the needed coverage?
Councilperson, the neighboring towers work off of three sectors, and the sectors that are serving this section of Geneva are at capacity. So what that means, let me back up and say they hit capacity. So they're not always operating at capacity, but at peak times they hit capacity. And that results in the drop calls during the heavy call periods. What this would do, this new cell site would help offload the traffic from the existing cell sites, provide better enhanced coverage to the city of Geneva, because this site would help to offload data, calls, and traffic, which alleviates capacity on the neighboring towers, which serve Geneva. So in other words, if this site were in service, it would offload the traffic from the neighboring sites, making them more efficient.
Okay, thank you.
Did that address your
Yes.
question? Okay.
So I understand why PZC made the decisions that they made. I do feel like I disagree with them about those decisions. On standard number 2, I think the evidence, everything that I can find, is pretty inconclusive about the effect on properties. I recognize that this is a stealth tower. It's meant to be less impactful on surrounding communities. It's also reduced height from what could be allowed in order to reduce impact. The comparative studies were done on areas with much taller towers, and different situations. I question taking residents' own studies into decision-making. We don't typically do that. We've had other situations that were contentious recently, and we did our own work. We made our own decisions. We didn't rely on the feedback that came just from residents who are, they have a reason why they're biased or upset about a decision that's being made, but our decision-making is about the entire community, and what's best for our whole community. And I struggle with the perception that we make some decisions based on locations and based on who the speakers are speaking out about the issues. Doesn't sit well with me. And as for the standard number 5, adversely affecting the character of the area, this is a commercial strip. We have needs for development in communities. Some of them are not as pretty as others. If this was telephone poles going up, people would have things to say about it, but we need telephones. At some point in history, I'm sure, nobody wanted the telephone poles in their neighborhood. So, I don't know, I'm a bit torn. I'm open to hearing what the rest of my colleagues have to say, but that's my thinking currently. So I yield the floor.
Alderperson Swanson.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to reiterate what Alderperson Marks said. I was looking forward to seeing the additional proprietary information that was promised during the PZC meeting, and that apparently did not happen, so we were not given that information to assist us. But I also was underwhelmed with the appraisal information that was to support why this does not impact home values. And in particular, I thought the Logan Avenue water tank information was very insufficient to support that having a tower near a home does not impact it. In fact, they concluded that falling prices, the data indicated falling prices as distance from the tower increased. But however, if you look at the detail information that was provided, the close homes to the water tower was a sample size of 3, of which one of them was listed twice because it was a flipped home. So of course, the value of that home is going to be significantly higher. In addition, the conclusion seemed to be that a price per square foot is the only thing that matters. It didn't matter whether someone had a half acre or a 7,000 square foot lot, it was how big the home was. I found that, I think there are many more factors that support home values, and to just base it on that seemed insufficient to me. So I agree with the PZC that the data does not support that there is not an impact, and will support the PZC's decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we continue, I'm going to ask our city attorney to address the matter regarding proprietary information that was shared with the city attorney by the company, and the city attorney opined with regard to the value of that information, which all of you received email correspondence from City Administrator Dawkins there too. So I'll turn the floor over to our city attorney to provide a little more context.
Thank you, Mayor. So the company did give some documents. It wasn't the proprietary data per se, but rather a compilation in the form of 3 charts. The charts were supportive of the lack of coverage and lack of capacity claims, but they were conclusory and they didn't have the buttressing documentary proprietary information upon which those conclusions were gleaned. I have reason to believe that information would have been about this thick and would have taken an engineering degree to decipher. So I think what was given was the best information they believed we could absorb without overwhelming us with information that we don't really have the definitions of and the ability to take notice of. But the 3 pages of graphs, to me, were nothing different than what we've already seen. And so rather than have everyone sign confidentiality agreements and maybe get ourselves in trouble, I made the call to return the information because I don't think it added anything to your deliberation.
Before I recognize Alderperson Maladra for a second time, is there anyone who has not yet spoken who wishes to do so? Alderperson Kasserag, and then Alderperson Ruby.
Thank you, Mayor. I, first of all, want to state clearly that I respectfully disagree with my colleague to the left. I think public input and public testimony is absolutely legitimate, necessary to the process, and I want everybody to know I'm here to listen to that. And I think to discount that public input just isn't right. So in that regard, I also want to thank the residents that put their hard work into this. Mr. Ost, Mr. Rathundi, I apologize, I can't remember the woman who did the, thank you very much. I thought that was very well done. And I also agree with Alderman Marks. I think that Condition 2 and Condition 5 of the standards, special use standards, are not met. I agree with Councilman Moran that if nothing else, that testimony was enough to call into question the assertions from the applicant. And certainly were not conclusive. And from the home value PowerPoint that you did, I thought the one, it's anecdotal, but I thought it was really powerful when at 1841 Fargo, they cleared out the tower in the back in the real estate listing. I mean, that just, why would they do that if there's absolutely no impact on property? I believe real estate agents and people in the industry know what they're doing, and obviously that was deliberate. And so I find the safety part, the E911 calls and the triangulation, I think we would be hearing about this if this was a problem in our community. And so I'm just not convinced that one tower by one cellular company is going to clear out, you know, all the potential for anything happening there. And so, again, I'm here planning to vote against this proposal. Thank you.
Alderperson Ruby.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate the thanks to the PZC and also the residents for your involvement in this. I really appreciate and value all the work and education and time and effort that you've put into this. On that same regard, I'd like to give the applicant the opportunity to respond to the fact that the documents that you provided were returned, that our lawyer just spoke about. I'm just curious if you would like to comment on the return of those documents. I feel like you tried to give us more information and it was rejected. So I was just wondering if you cared to comment on that. And I yield the floor.
Certainly, Councilperson, yes, we were asked at the last meeting, the zoning meeting, to provide additional information showing the need that our RF engineer has for this particular area. And so initially, we provided an affidavit from the radio frequency engineer stating the need and why we needed it. And the board asked for additional information with stats. They wanted to see the numbers behind it. So calculations were run showing the coverage and performance of this particular area. And as was referenced by the city attorney, it was a stack of documents much like this, much like a structural report on a tower. There's a lot of calculations that go into that. So what was sent to the attorney was a summary of that information. And the summary showed deficiencies in our performance in this particular area. But it was in a format, the slides, I believe, were in a format that made it easier to read, as the attorney has mentioned, then the calculations that would have been, nearly impossible unless you're a telecom engineer to fully understand. But they are available. Thank you.
Alderperson Ruby still has the floor.
I yield the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderperson Malater, you've asked to be recognized a second time, then Alderperson Patchke.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something on my position regarding the 911 calls. I'm not advocating that we wait for there to be a problem. I am saying that there is no problem today, and I've seen no evidence that this site is the only site that will avoid a problem in the future. Avoiding that problem in the future is not for us to do. It's for them to do, because it's a problem that exists with Verizon coverage, not AT&T coverage, not US Cellular coverage, but one company has supposedly a gap that they're claiming this is the only location that will fill. And I reject that. I see nothing that supports that whatsoever. And rejecting it doesn't mean I'm advocating until 911, or that 911 systems blow up and start dropping calls. Alderman Swanson and his comments about the water tower, I think that's very relevant. I look at this as a utility use, and it's not even a utility use like a water tower. A water tower is owned by the city of Geneva and exists for the direct benefit of the residents of the city of Geneva. This cell tower exists so that Verizon can grow their business. Yes, it will help Verizon customers in Geneva, but it's going to help Verizon customers everywhere. The primary beneficiary is Verizon. It's a different animal than a water tower. Thank you. That's it.
Alderperson Patchke.
I just wanted to clarify because I think my comments were mischaracterized. I was referring to using residents' own research in decision-making, not devaluing the voices of residents. I've never made a comment to that effect.
Alderperson Bowring.
So I really appreciate hearing the discussion this evening. I have a few additional comments I wanted to make. I guess I would reiterate what Alderperson Paschke just said. I also am concerned about setting a precedent of taking but not delving into or doing any due diligence on data presented to us by residents. I believe that is the job primarily of our staff. And so I guess I would point out a number of my colleagues have noted that they support the PZC's decision, and I understand and respect that. I will say that also means that they are disagreeing with our professional staff's analysis. That's another factor for me. I try to take that very seriously because I am not a subject matter expert in everything that comes before us. Doesn't mean I agree with absolutely everything that we hear from staff either, but it's a fairly high burden for me to disagree on something like that. I wanted to come back to something Alderperson Maladra mentioned about well, if there's no impact on property values, why is there any effort being made to minimize the number of residents that any possible site would impact? And I think the answer to that is that those two things are not the same. It's one thing to talk about whether there's a diminishment in property values, and again, what I reviewed were the peer-reviewed studies that a resident brought forward. That was something that I could independently verify. It's not anecdotal, it's statistically significant, which I think matters, to the points brought up by other constituents questioning the analysis of the auditor presented by the applicant. They were questioning how statistically significant some of that is, as Alderperson Swanson, I think, also rightfully brought up. Yet then to elevate anecdotal analysis even of, more than 3 sites, say all of Eaglebrook or all of additional sites in Geneva, it's anecdotal, it's not statistically significant. So to come back to these peer-reviewed studies, they show a wide variety in potential decline. They offer several different explanations for why that decline could be perceived, and one of them is that they cannot, this is a quote, this is from the 2019 study, cannot rule out the possibility that towers are endogenously located in areas with low land values, that this is an upper bound. So again, these studies are specific snapshots of specific areas. We're trying to extrapolate, project what this might mean for this area. So I think the difference between, all right, there's a lot of ideas entangled here, I apologize. To come back to the thing I was initially saying, I think there's a difference between the assertion that there's a decline in property values and wanting to minimize the number of residents impacted. And that's because clearly residents have strong feelings about this. We have seen on other issues that residents have strong feelings on most types of development change. I think that has to be weighed against the total potential public benefit. So I think it's reasonable for a developer to try to minimize the potential impact or the perceived impact. I don't think that means that there is necessarily a negative impact on property values. I have not seen that conclusively demonstrated. I understand it's a fear, and I respect that. I will note this is a fear we hear about for many different types of projects that are proposed, including affordable housing a few years ago before I was on this council. We've not seen that actually play out in reality. So I think sometimes it's important not to let the fear of a new thing govern, doing something that is of a public benefit. I respect that there's a difference of opinion amongst the council about whether or not this does actually provide a public benefit. I personally might have liked to see the proprietary information, if only to understand a little better for myself what the percentage of dropped calls were or the performance indicators that they are concerned about. As Alderperson Maladra brought up, this is a utility, but it's complicated because it's not publicly owned, right? So it's a public benefit, but it's owned by a private corporation. So I think we do have to consider that there's a public benefit and there's a benefit to this corporation. I don't know that those are mutually exclusive. And so I think that that's probably part of why I see this a bit differently from others. I feel very invested in making sure that we don't ever get to the point where even one 911 call is dropped. Because if you are that person making that call, absolutely the last thing you want is to not be able to get the help that you need. That being said, I'm not a subject matter expert, so my inclination was to defer to the staff analysis there. I guess I will also say, is there any location for something like this that is going to please everybody? One of my colleagues asked me informally, would I object to this in my own neighborhood? And frankly, I would not. I think this is less annoying than the power poles that are all throughout my neighborhood. Those are, at almost every house and going across the street. This is one tower sticking up somewhere that would be visible from some homes. So, it seems clear that I'm in the minority on the council, and I respect that. But I guess I would just put out to my colleagues, is there ever going to be a situation where we see a proposal for this and we can say, oh, everyone's going to be happy about this? I doubt it, because I think change like this is challenging, but I think it's an infrastructure need that we are eventually going to need to deal with, whether it's for this particular situation or somewhere else. So I hope when that time comes, we are open to seeing this type of infrastructure that is needed for something that we all use every day in our lives, which is cell phones. I hope that we will be able to find places to have those so that we can continue to make use of this resource. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Anyone else on the dais? Or Alderperson Ruby joining us remotely? We have a motion and we have a second on this matter.
Mayor, can I have
Alderperson
a
Marks?
question.
Yes,
It's
sir.
a point of order, not a statement.
Of course.
This is If we vote yes, it's granting. If we vote no, because, sometimes we have
Yeah,
that distinguished
I was
one,
going to
and
make that
just wanna
statement as
make
well.
that-
The motion is made in the affirmative.
That's-
Therefore, if you vote yes, you support the motion, which in effect overturns the recommendation by the Planning and Zoning Commission. If you vote nay, you are voting against the motion, which stays the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're very welcome. And only 6 votes is required to pass this motion. It's a majority of those holding on, no, actually, it's a majority of those present, so forgive me, it's 5, since there's 8 present.
Okay.
Everyone clear? Anyone else, last-minute comments prior to taking the roll by our distinguished clerk? City Clerk Kellick, please take the roll call on ordinance 2024-31.
Marks,
Nay.
Paschke,
Aye.
Swanson,
Nay.
Bowering,
Aye.
Ruby,
Ruby, nay.
Kilberg,
Nay.
Kasserag,
Nay.
Maladra.
Nay.
The motion on the table to approve ordinance 2024-31 has failed, with 2 votes in the affirmative, 6 in the negative. We jump to public comment on the agenda. We invite anyone joining us this evening to share with us your thoughts, your comments regarding whatever issue you'd like. The podium is open. The floor is yours. It's our chance to listen, your chance to speak. Good evening.
Hi, my name is Dale Rothundi. So the vote's over, right? This is just a general public comment?
Yes, sir. The vote is open. You can speak to anything you'd like,
Well, I was
particularly
just gonna
well,
say-
things in St. Charles. That'd be helpful.
No, I was just going to say, I've been in telecommunications for a company for 38 years, 30 in wireless. Many patents in call processing, building wireless platforms. As far as the 911, you should understand it's the highest priority call in the system. And if systems are approaching capacity, they won't take any other calls because 911, there has to be enough bandwidth for 911 calls in the system. You can't even do maintenance on a system if there's 911 calls in progress. Even if it takes an hour for the 911 call to drain, the system won't go down for maintenance. A lot of protection is put into the system so that they never lose 911 calls. And you also have to remember you have multiple, carriers in the area. This is just one wireless carrier. You got AT&T, T-Mobile, and others that are servicing the same areas. So you really should ask for detailed information when somebody says things about drop calls. This is wireless, not wireline. About 1% of wireless calls get dropped just because of the air interface, weather, other interferences, obstacles. So it's not as reliable as you think it is, not as reliable as when you have the AT&T wired phone in your house, which a lot of people are doing away with. But when you go to wireless, you have to accept the fact in general it's just less reliable. So there's a lot behind 911. It's not just a general thing you could wave your hand on. But I just wanted to point out, just so you know in the future, systems are very careful on handling as they approach capacity to make sure they have enough room to handle a 911 call when it comes in. So even if it's at full capacity, like 98% utilization, you could still handle 911 calls. They won't take a low priority call to leave bandwidth available so that a 911 call can come through if needed. So the only time it wouldn't go through is if the system crashed and went down, which happens. So just wanted to point that out. I don't think it changes anything, but when I sit here and listen to some of the discussion about 911, I just want to make sure you realize it's handled with highest priority in the system possible to make sure that nobody ever gets their 911 call dropped, even if the system is fully utilized. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? If not, we'll head to new business, and this is an opportunity for the city council to share with all of us any new business or comments they'd like to make regarding anything. Silence Dare I ask for? Motion to adjourn offered by Alderperson Marks. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. This special city council meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very, very much. The microphones are off and the cameras are off.